The Longer Story, The Bigger Picture is a research project which looks at the question of migration through different kinds of text, whether they're images, photographs, media articles, any number of cultural artifacts come into our remit.
The idea of this project is to look at the concept of migration via the angle of representations, and to be able to reconnect these representations on the longue durée, so looking at historical construction of these representations, but also looking at the geographical and geopolitical dynamic behind these movements, to understand exactly how they're formed and how they occur within the French and Francophone context.
So Sophie was looking at the work of Mathieu Pernaut, who's an artist I had been working with already. I translated one of Mathieu's books into English for publication. And we were a little astonished to see that we were working on very similar things just a few doors down the corridor from each other, and we'd never realised. So we invited Mathieu over, and once we started talking about our research, we realised that the kinds of approaches we have could connect very usefully and be very complementary in actual fact, because we come from quite different disciplinary backgrounds. Because we learn about migration through the visual images with which we're bombarded, it's really important that we show how the visual can be deconstructed, how it needs to be interpreted differently, and hopefully what we'll bring through our research is a critical approach that will impact also on the different kinds of analyses that are performed by our colleagues in different departments. Much of the collaborative work we do occurs digitally, because it's incredibly difficult to find a time to come together in a face-to-face way and work together. So we have conversations informally over coffee, we catch up on the corridor, but when it comes to actually writing, we tend to do that online using Google Docs, for example, where we can both meet online and write on the article at the same time. Sophie and I have worked together for the last maybe 3 years, I think, working together on a number of conference papers which have been expanded to produce articles for journals which will be published in the not too distant future. Our big project is working on a book about the representation of Calais in the media. We're lucky, if that's the right word to use, that Calais clearly falls within our most recognisable area of study, French. And we've been looking at the ways in which the French media, the British media, but also French artists explore how migration is represented.
Collaboration is essential. It's been so fruitful for me, from my own perspective, but also from the students' perspective as well, because they can see that we're working collaboratively on one specific question. It's been extremely productive to be able to bounce back ideas, especially for me, trained from a historical perspective and looking at the same material from a different angle. That constant dialoguing about the same questions and same material is essential, I think, to make research extremely productive and current as well for the students.
I think just through conversation, ideas will emerge that you wouldn't have if you were on your own in your own office. I also collaborate with the artists whose work we're exploring, so we don't just look at their works online or in galleries. I have conversations and relationships with all of the artists with whom I'm working. It tends to be quite a two-way relationship. Sometimes I will do translations for them, or I will interview them for journals, and they will talk to me about their work. On some occasions I've been with them while they've been making the work, and that gives a super valuable insight into the conditions of production, the ways in which ethically, for example, they're navigating some fairly complex questions when they're actually on the scene of migration.
We are trying to go beyond these constructs that have been put in place within the academic world, but also within society in general, and being able to understand this question of migration from a historical, aesthetic, geopolitical and urban history of migration is essential in order for us to get this bigger picture of the question. It's also very important to to be able to question the use of disciplines in the first place. Clearly we are both trained within different disciplines and bringing with us these training and these approaches, but we also, in a way, a little bit like Lévi-Strauss would call it, we use it as a book, as a box of tools that we can borrow whenever it's necessary in order to unpack some meaning that will be hidden behind the work of certain artists. So the artists, so critical discourse analysis using historical understanding of certain concepts that have been rooted over a certain period of time within the French history or Francophone history is essential in order to retrace and reroute the understanding of migration.